Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions and the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. In this episode, I interview Chris Valdheims, formerly known as John Tobin. At the time of this interview, he was still going by John, so that's how I refer to him in the interview. Chris is the co-founder of Counsel for Creators and a vanguard in the subscription legal services space. His firm is one of the longest-running subscription-based legal service models and is a great example of how you can use the model. After we recorded this episode, Chris launched a podcast and newsletter called Hyper Memoir with the mission to help others find and develop their creative voice. If you want to know why he changed his name, then give it a read and a listen. Link to that in the show notes. Thank you to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes, more on them later, and remember to use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. It lets them know you found out about them from the podcast, you get 10% off, and it really supports the show. I'd love to hear about your experience using my sponsors. Please email me your comments at kurbis@lawsubscribed.com or send me a direct message on LinkedIn. For subscriptionseminar.com, I'm taking firms off the waitlist one at a time in the order they signed up, so sign up now to get your spot in line. I'm an active participant in the process using the subscription model, so I can only work with so many at a time. Thank you for your patience. Another way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today John Tobin of Counsel for Creators, one of the, at least in my research, one of the longest running attorneys who's actually using the subscription model successfully, or so maybe we'll hear. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
So I've heard of you, of course, but just in case my listeners haven't, even though you've been around the block for a little while, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name's John Tobin. I'm an attorney here in Los Angeles. We work with creative business owners. So that's everything from artists to musicians to content creators all across the board. And it's, over the years, it's expanded. But kind of like you mentioned, one of the things that's unique about our firm is that I think it was about close to 8 years ago, we started offering services on a subscription model. So that's how a lot of people find us and a lot of people start working with us. But ultimately, our goal is to help creatives and help creators use the law, like not have it feel like it's this big mystical thing that they can't access and can't use, but actually make it feel like something that they can use.
So before you, 8 years ago, started using that model, were you billing your time?
Billing time and then doing a lot of flat fee. So it's kind of a mix of hourly and flat fee. I think I got away from hourly billing pretty quickly just because I've been in business and I realized, the model of billing time one-to-one for money is not a great model, not a great business model.
So did you have a career before you went to law school then?
Yeah. So before I went to law school, I was a designer and software developer for close to 15 years. So I did that pretty much like right out of high school, went to law school later in life and switched over.
So you can't hear software developer and not think of software as a service,
Mm-hmm.
build on a subscription. Is that what introduced you to the model, or did you come to it for law in a different way?
A little bit different. I think it was really responding to customer needs, so for me, I think the motivation was less about the software and more about okay, this is what people want, or this is what people need, or there's kind of this gap in, between what I'm offering and what would actually be helpful.
And then was Counsel for Creators always the name of the firm, or did that come about later? And how did that come about?
Yeah, so that was always the name. We started in 2013. So actually, I just realized it's our 10-year anniversary, like right about now. I don't know exactly when, but I think April of 2013 is when we started. And so
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's funny because it kind of came and went. And I'm like, wait a second, we've been around for a while now. So 10 years ago, we started, and I just wanted a name that described what we were doing. And, one of the things I did not want to do necessarily is use my name in a law firm, because I always had aspirations for it to grow beyond me. And so I felt like, at least for me, that would have kind of be limiting. And, for me, again, as someone involved in design and software and just building companies, I wanted the name to sort of speak to what we were trying to do.
I mean, and what a great name, because that's part of having to sell your product to your potential clients, something that they don't teach you in law school, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. And yeah, it's funny because I think when a lot of lawyers heard me name our firm that, and remember this was 10 years ago, they're like, wait, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, I read the ethics rules and there's no reason you can't do that. So I'm going to do it.
And that was innovative that long ago, but now I mean, now you can do it in every jurisdiction. And
Yeah.
so previously you couldn't, but now
Yeah.
you can. So like this is a great example. Like when I give a talk or a CLE on the subscription model and how firms could use it, like niching down with a name, like a trade name for your firm is one of the things. And Counsel for Creators is one of those examples, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we'll go live before we're recording. There's an episode with an attorney who has Provider Legal, where he
Right.
represents medical providers.
Mhm.
Those are his clients. So like Subscription Attorney LLC, my firm name, actually maybe not a great trade name because it's super broad, right?
Yeah.
Still a trade name,
But that's
but
good.
there's something to be said about the Counsel for Creators, and I'm surprised we haven't seen more counsel for this, counsel for that, you know.
Yeah.
Unless you have you seen anyone adapt your name?
Well, we've seen some people adapt our name. And, when I did the air quotes, I don't know if anyone can see that, but we've had a few people who get remarkably close to our name. And that's when we have to actually tell them, hey, by the way, you're also a lawyer. You should know better. So pick a different name.
And so just in case, because we haven't actually specifically said it's assumed Counsel for Creators, you're doing IP type stuff, business type stuff, but like tell us exactly what are the practice areas that you're working in?
Yeah. So mainly it's setting up companies. So corporate formation, trademarks, copyrights, contracts, and then just general sort of business advice, and what we also do is, you know, offer a lot of legal advice, but also business advice. I mean, I tell my clients, I've worked with probably over 1,000 businesses over this last decade. So, you kind of learn what works, what doesn't work, not even just from like a legal perspective, but like, oh yeah, like this partner might be a problem, or whatever. This person you're thinking of talking to, here's why I've seen how this goes down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't want to mess with a trademark attorney's trademark. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's weird. Yeah, there's a couple of people who, we've seen a few people over the years where, it's gotten a little bit gray area, and some people whose name is like really close, and we've had to, reach out to other attorneys, and I'm, in the back of my mind, I have to restrain myself, but I'm like, you should know better. Why are we even having this talk? You know?
Yeah, yeah. So longtime listeners will know that there's obviously ongoing needs as a small business owner or creator for their intellectual property protection, for compliance and other business advice. But how is it that you even sell that to the client, and why are they subscribing?
So a lot of people will initially subscribe because they have some kind of burning issue. So they'll be like, I just got a contract from, this company. I want to work with them, but I have questions about the agreement. Or, I'm thinking of bringing my cousin on, as part of my company, not really sure how to do it. Whatever. There's usually some sort of question that precipitates them like looking for a lawyer and being like, okay, I need some help beyond what I could find on LegalZoom, beyond what I can find, spending hours searching on the internet. So then kind of what happens is once they get in, one of the principles that we have is there's really no business out there that doesn't have legal issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's impossible, because if you're hiring people, if you're running a brand, if you're building a company, if you're putting out products, there's always legal issues. And I explain to my clients that legal issues is sort of like that, sort of like I always look at it like if you were, let's say your thing was helping with fitness, right? That's a medical issue in a certain sense, so if your blood sugar is weird or, whatever, that's going to make it harder for you to be fit. So we're always talking about like, this is really about making your business fit, optimizing your business. So there's always something you can do. It's not just about protecting yourself from lawsuits. So there's education that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I go to chamber meetings, being a solopreneur and a solo practice attorney. You gotta do stuff like that. And recently in a recent version of a pitch that I did it was like going to a gym and get your business legally fit.
Yeah.
It's like just like sort of the off the top of my head sort of phrase that came out, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And keep it that way, and I explain to people, if you think you don't have legal issues, what you're really telling me, what I'm hearing is I don't have legal issues that I know about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never had a conversation with someone where I'm like, yep, good to go. Like, you're good, never, not once.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, 8 years ago when you were making the pivot, like how did you even know what to charge? How did you even know, do you do annual subscriptions, monthly subscriptions? I mean, the ethics rules haven't changed that much. So like
Right.
the ethics rules are basically the same. So like, where did you go to figure out this is how I can do it?
So in terms of like pricing and like the revenue model and business model and such, we decided on the price first. I just decided, arbitrarily, basically, like, hey, I want it to cost this much. And then I decided monthly because, I don't want to collect money from people if they don't like the service. I had actually, as an early lawyer, I got into like a month, not an annual service contract with a company that, is out there. And I won't mention who they are, but the point is I hated that experience because I was paying for this thing I didn't really want for like 2 years. And I'm like, okay, so not going to do that, and now I'll never use that company again,
Right.
and I recommend them and it's just, it's terrible. So anyway, I decided not going to lock anyone in and going to make it kind of an affordable thing so that it's in a way for people a no brainer, like, it's really like a small decision for most businesses to spend what we charge right now, which is $95 a month.
Right. And I mean, it's been that way at least for a few years from what I've been able to see. Obviously,
Yeah.
prices could change. Was that the original number too? Is it just you're going to
Yeah.
charge about 100 and that's where it
Yeah.
is?
Yeah. And then I think, I think we've been talking about raising the price, it would be the first time we did it, but, I think we obviously offer a lot more value. We're a lot more experienced and a lot better, but, obviously, prices change and, still it's ultimately what, then once we decide on that price, if I decided on 300 a month, I always kind of work backwards. Okay. What can I give people that's worth more than 300 that we can fulfill on, you know?
Right. Right. Which is related to my next question, which is, well, what are they getting for $95 a month? And is that an earned fee upon receipt?
Yeah. So what they're getting is essentially access to us, so now they can, it's essentially kind of like a retainer situation. We will review contracts and, essentially, yeah, review contracts. They can schedule phone calls with us. So if you look at it in a way, it's kind of like a retainer, like, the traditional, like, $5,000 a month thing you might have to an attorney. It's just, except this is a lot smaller.
Right. And so where is it? Is it somewhere in your engagement agreement that it's like scoped, like these are the services that you get in exchange for the $95 a month? And if you need more beyond that scope, here's the other fees that you charge and how do you handle those types of things?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I explain to people, and I don't know if this is a great analogy, but I'm going to try. I mean, it's sort of like how you can buy iCloud storage with Apple. That doesn't mean you get an iPhone. It doesn't mean you get a Mac. If you want those, you can pay for them. And so that's kind of how we do it. And we explain that to people, obviously, in a way that they understand and can get, and we try to be really upfront with people that this is really just to get, a lot of people don't understand immediately that the legal advice itself is valuable. And once they experience it, once they're like, oh, okay, like I talked to this lawyer and suddenly I'm not confused. I've been walking around confused for like 3 years about something. And in 10 minutes, we figured it out. Then they see what the value is. I'm like, yeah, so that's what we do for that price point. If you want us to do a trademark for you, if you want us to draft a contract, here's what that looked like. Here's what it costs.
Right. And so they sign up at $95 a month. Do they have like access to a client portal? What does that look like?
Yeah. So we have a member network, which is, kind of like we use Mighty Networks, which I think a lot of other people also use or something similar. And so they have access to that. And then in there, we've embedded our calendar. We've embedded forms where people can upload documents or communicate with us. And that's what it is, and really we encourage everybody to go through there, even if people email us, we'll say, hey, like actually do it through the system, or, if they call us randomly, do it through the system. The reason why is because we do have a system. So the reason we can charge $95 a month is by having a system. Now, if I was fielding emails all day, I'm doubling the price tomorrow, because I don't want to spend my day fielding emails. Right. So the way we keep it low is we have a system.
Right. Right. I try to keep the clients, in the system, but at least I find that institutional clients who have hired legal counsel before, they just want to email you. So
Yeah.
you make your disclosures. Hey, it's not you're probably waiving attorney-client privilege because it's unencrypted communications. Let's
Yeah.
communicate through the portal. Let's share documents securely, not over email. But if they do it, then they do it. So have you run into those same problems with clients who have hired lawyers before, that this is just the way they want to do it?
Once in a while, I mean, sometimes they'll come in because they expect that's the way it is. And then we'll actually say, no, we actually have a better way. And like, trust us on this. And it's way more efficient. Like, and then I explained to people like, look, I was answering the phone for you when you randomly called. That means that when we're on the phone or I'm looking at something for you, I'm also randomly answering the phone. You don't want that, right? Okay, cool. So we're not doing it,
So scheduled phone calls, not random
Yeah.
phone calls.
No.
So you mentioned Mighty Networks. So you're the second lawyer who's using subscriptions I've heard using Mighty Networks. And I mean, a lot of people use Mighty Networks, just very
Yeah.
few lawyers. So that's a subscription, I'm assuming, that you're paying, right?
Yeah.
Right? Scheduling software are you using?
So right now it's Acuity. So we use Acuity scheduling, but I mean, it could be Calendly, and I think there's a few others. I'm really agnostic. It just so happens we landed on Acuity when we were making that choice years ago.
Yeah. And I think they've been acquired by Squarespace. Was your website a Squarespace website?
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are some of the other, this is the part I like to call the subscriptions that power your subscription law
Yeah.
firm.
Let's do it.
So, we've got Acuity, we've got Mighty Networks. What are some other subscriptions that you're paying for?
So Acuity, Mighty Networks, Typeform, we actually pay for the premium version of Typeform, which is a little bit, we pay annually. It's a little bit expensive, but at the same time, it's like, when you think about the efficiencies, the less work my staff has to do processing stuff, it's great, and, the way I kind of look at, and hopefully this doesn't go too far outside of the conversation, but software is like, hiring software to do a job in essence. Like how much would I have to pay a person to do the same thing that software is doing? So if a software is like $1,000 for a year, I'm like, well, I'd have to pay someone $5,000 to do that job,
Right. And when you know what your revenue, your monthly recurring or annual recurring revenue is going to be at a minimum, it's very easy to make that kind of a spend. I mean, obviously, it sounds like not all of your revenue is generated through subscription, but at least at a minimum, here's what I'm getting on a subscription for revenue.
Yeah, and it's much easier to sort of, I guess, do the financials, kind of, go backwards and be like, hey, this subscription is supporting this much revenue or what have you.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard Jotform before too is another one that attorneys like to use. I mean, Typeform and Jotform, these are just kind of like Google Forms on steroids, right?
Yeah. Yeah. With logic and, integrations, and we use Zapier a lot, like, Zapier a lot for like connecting off everything. So, that's also what makes the system work pretty well. If someone submits a form, it'll tell us, in Slack, hey, someone submitted a document for review. Let's get it out there. What else
How does Zapier charge? Does Zapier charge a subscription as well for a certain amount of Zaps?
I believe they charge like a monthly subscription. And then like if you use over a certain, and it has a certain number of tasks. And then if you, I think, go over that, maybe you pay more. I don't think we've ever gone over it on whatever plan we're on. But then, yeah, I mean, I think we use the standard kind of things. Like we have a WordPress website. We use MailChimp for mailing lists. I'm trying to think what else is relevant, maybe just to subscription. But yeah, I mean, I think for subscription, it's that. Yeah. So those are kind of the main ones.
And then when your clients need services outside of the subscription, it's all flat fee work, or do you still do any hourly stuff?
Pretty much all flat fee. Once in a while, like I would say that the hourly comes up because we also have an entertainment practice. That often comes if there's some sort of open-ended thing, like maybe a negotiation or something where it's like, literally we don't know, is the other, like we've had situations where, other parties completely reasonable. And it's like, okay, cool. That took us an hour because we just, we're able to just patch out the issues, and, it's what nobody on the other side was over lawyering. And we've had ones where, they want to have like 10 conference calls with 8 lawyers over the next 5 months to, discuss indemnification clauses. So that's how much that costs.
So I guess, so like, would you give legal services to any client at a higher flat fee if they weren't a subscriber, or do they have to subscribe first to get access to the flat fees?
They don't have to subscribe, but what we do offer is a discount for people who have been a member for a little bit. And then, even informally, if someone's been a member for a long time and they're like, look, I need help getting a trademark done, it's like, we want to make it work. So, even informally, we're often, we take, there's no like formal system, and it's not like we have to, but we want to make sure that our clients are taken care of. So, yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, you certainly have that discretion as a business owner, and they are engaged with you as a subscriber. So it's not like they're some random person.
Right.
For the discount, is there like, it's like after 3 months of being subscribed or after 6 months? Like, do you have a set limit for when subscribers get access to that discount on flat fees?
Yeah, pretty much after 3 months. Like because what we don't want necessarily is someone just joining just to get a discount and then quitting or something like that. I mean, again, that kind of stuff surprisingly happens very little. So even if it did happen, I'd be like, okay, this, whatever. I don't really care. But, I think a lot of lawyers are afraid of people gaming the system. And yeah, we get someone once in a while, but that's like, our annual, oh yeah, here's the annual person who's, thinks they're clever, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I've only been using the subscription model for about 14, 15 months at the time of recording, which is how long I've been a solo. Like I started my practice with that model, but I've made adaptations even just in 14, 15 months. But I found that even clients who will unsubscribe and no longer be clients, they still think of me as their lawyer. And when they need something else, they will resubscribe. So I've made it super easy to just unsubscribe and resubscribe. So have you seen anything like that happen?
All the time. And I actually really like that. That's, at first that's kind of like, oh, they're just, like kind of violating the spirit of the subscription. But I'm like, well, that's serving people. And ultimately, when we look at our numbers, it's fine. Like we're making what we want to make. Okay, cool. People can do that. I don't really, and 'cause I have people who, again, I just want it to be accessible. I mean, that's the main, and again, as long as we can be financially supported, I guess, in doing it, then it's fine.
So sustainable business, not let's grow for the sake of growth and Counsel for Creators will be the next big giant law firm.
I mean, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, I mean, there's obviously a right size, I think, for our firm, and we're not there yet.
Mhm.
I do think that, the world would be a better place if more people could access our services and we could serve more clients. So that's true. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily like, venture led growth kind of.
Yeah. Not that it could be.
I mean, it could be, hey, yeah, I mean, we're open, but, point is that's not like our goal currently.
Right, right, right. I do want to challenge you for a quick second here, because you said that you might charge hourly in the event of an unknown how long it's going to take for negotiations. But I think, and I just want to get your opinion on this, I think you could set a monthly number, like a subscription add-on, if you will, that if you have to start negotiating, they have to pay you X amount per month during the pendency of those negotiations, and you'll be happy with a certain number if you could just decide what that is. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, but I think, it's really deciding that number. And the problem is also I don't have enough data because, we have and this is really where they, you kind of do see the matters being unique, and we don't have enough where it happens so frequently
Mhm.
that, I could actually say, okay, well, here's on average what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I unbundle negotiations from all but my business level subscription packages, where if somebody needs me to start negotiating something for them, I will charge them a couple $100 more a month. So like not that much, $200 more per month. But I'm also
Cool.
representing
That's cool.
I'm representing the latent legal market, right? So I mean, we're talking about very small businesses
Yeah.
or landlords or tenants, very,
Mhm.
everyday people. Because some lawyers say to me, well, how the heck are you making any money at $200 a month? Well,
Right.
they're already paying me something to even get access to that. And then also they're going to keep using me, and
Mhm.
I'm incentivized to just get it done.
Yeah.
Get it done. And if you have 3 people paying you that, you're not making a lot of money. If you have 20, 30 people paying it,
Mhm.
now it makes more sense. And
Yeah.
so the clients know they're getting a great deal. Ethically speaking, it's a great value. So, I think that that's an acceptable thing ethically. And so, at the end of the day, like that's the number I've decided for the market I'm trying to serve. And I've been very satisfied with it. And so have my clients. So I just think that for you, there's probably a number where even if you don't have enough data, you could say with the data you have, maybe it's X amount. Now let's multiply that by 2. Now I'm going to be happy. And if my client's willing to pay that, maybe they could pick, and you give them the choice. This number that I came up with based on limited data that I did a multiple of, or the billable hour, and
Right.
see what they do, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. And what I love about hearing that from you is it opens my mind. I mean, I've been obviously doing this for a little while, but what I'm always really excited to hear is when other people who are doing subscription have ideas that just didn't occur to me. So that's one of those, like I'm like, yeah, let me think about that one.
That's what this is all about. You're probably like, I think you're the 21st attorney I've interviewed using the subscription model on the show. And I mean, and I've conducted at this point over 40 interviews, but you're the first one who offers the discount after 3 months. Some don't offer a discount at all. So that's a brand new thing that my listeners will be hearing for the first time, which I think is actually a really clever thing. And maybe for another firm, for their market, it's not 3 months, it's 6 months, but it's,
Right.
Something everyone, the listeners can take and adapt. All right. So for the other services you're delivering, which are mostly going to be flat fee, efficiency still really matters. So are there other tools like document automation tools, or like how are you managing that stuff? Like
Mm.
how are you implementing efficiencies elsewhere in your practice?
I mean, still a lot of the same tools. We add in like Clio, like as our, document management or like, I guess, practice management tool. So that's been helpful. And I think just having like good processes in place. So, again, and then sticking with them. Things like email automation for reminders. So we use like Autopilot, but then also a software called Mixmax, which, so like if we have, for instance, let's say like you're a new client and we need you to, provide information for your LLC. Maybe you've had the experience where People are like, I'll get to it. So we're pretty aggressive. I'm like, hey, every few days, we didn't get the thing yet. We didn't get the thing yet. We didn't get the thing yet until they do it, because we notice that what happens is people won't do it. They'll forget. And then later they'll pop up later, wanting to do it when it's kind of not the right time. So anyway, so yeah, I think stuff like email automation is really helpful in kind of giving people the service that they paid for.
Mm-hmm. Other than just continuing to sell the value of the subscription, is there anything that you're doing to like incentivize clients stay subscribed, or like extra special things to make clients happy?
Yeah. So what we do and what we're doing, and kind of still working out the best way we can do this consistently, is kind of just doing weekly, we call them workshops right now, where it's like basically a Zoom session where we can all get on there. Sometimes there's a topic, and then other times they're just kind of free form, like, hey, bring whatever challenges or opportunities are going on in your business. And it's also a way for our clients to kind of meet each other and see, who's doing what, and hear from other people, and not just from me, but from other business owners. And, what's kind of cool about that is you'll have a little bit of a knowledge exchange where, these people have, the group of people who work with us, they're a self-selected group of people who not only are creative business owners, but they're like determined to get it right. I'd say that's the profile of our clients, are people who they're like, yes, I know I could go on legal Zoom, but I really want to do this right. I'm really trying to build something important here. So I need to talk with you guys. So it's like a self-selected group, and I think people get a lot of value out of interacting with each other. So I think that's in our Mighty network too. We can post content and stuff there. We have courses and videos and stuff like that. So really trying to lean in more on that, and I think the evolution is more towards less of the one-on-one counsel. And, a lot of times it's, I'm telling people, like, we have a video about when you should register your copyright. Go watch that. I'm going to send you the link right now, because it doesn't necessarily serve them or me to have to repeat that information in a phone conversation 100 times, so I just record it.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database, since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSubscribed at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney, or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form at scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSubscribed at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. So do you have like a knowledge base in Mighty Networks that they could go to like view that kind of stuff, or is this okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's usually like in response to like if once I answer a question a couple dozen times, I'm like, I should just turn on the camera and record it,
What are you using for that?
So for that, I just use Vimeo. Like there's like the browser plugin, because often it's, there's something on my screen that I want to show them, or if it's just me, like the camera here, I just press the button and go, okay, cool. I'm going to talk today about like the right timing for registering a trademark. So let's go,
Yeah. I mean, if that system works for you, that's great. But here's another, and longtime listeners will all talk about this tool. Sometimes Descript is the tool I use to edit this podcast, but I also use it for client video stuff too.
Cool.
Because you could do screen share, you could do just a recording and unlike Zoom and some of these other things, you can record up to 4K. Editing is super easy. You can even add a little bit of licensed background music to make it a little bit more engaging, and it's part of your subscription to Descript, right? So I don't know. I feel like I need to start putting an affiliate link to Descript in my show notes.
Yeah, because I started using it. Like I said, I'm starting to build another different podcast, and so I was looking at what's the editing tool, and Descript is the one that really stood out for me. So yeah, so you should put an affiliate link. I'll go click on it and tell other people to do the same. It's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I like it.
It is talk about efficiencies. I
Mhm.
mean, when you're not billing your first of all, if you're billing your time, anything that's not billable, you shouldn't be wasting any more time than you can. But especially when you're not billing your time, efficiency matters. And Descript took a 2 hour per podcast episode editing process down to about 30 minutes.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So moving back to the subscription stuff, I think where I want to go into next is sort of like the lessons learned. So,
Okay.
you've been doing this for a long time. I think it's like, I mean, you, Kim Bennett, Jess Birkin are kind of the ones who have been doing it the longest at this point that are still doing it. So what have been some of your lessons learned? Some things that if you could go back 8 years ago and said, hey, do these things instead of what you're thinking here, like what would those be?
I would think I'd always start with like the content portion earlier. I mean, we did start, I think a couple of years in, like, we had like a WordPress site where people had to log in. It was kind of janky, but I think I would go harder on that, and have like a good knowledge base from day one. I think also one thing I learned is just being very clear in the marketing and sales. And obviously our intention is always to be very clear in the marketing and sales. But I think, again, I think you have people who come in with different expectations, and it's really important to set those expectations. Like we've had people join, and again, I take full responsibility in terms of, learning how to communicate these things. People join who are like, oh, cool. I'm like, I just joined. I'm calling you Friday night. What do you mean you're not going to take my phone call? You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, that's not how it works. So I think just being very clear, like whether it's videos or copy or whatever, that says, here's how it works. Here's what you can expect when you get in. Here's how it's going to play out. If it's not right for you, that's fine. And I think one thing, that we were getting a lot of early on, not a lot, but I think we don't get it at all now, but we used to, is people who wanted to like sue somebody because they think lawyer, I'm going to, I have a problem. I'm going to sue someone. And it was always like, well, we don't even do litigation. That's not even a thing we do, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely got that, but I've also gotten people signing up, even though my automated onboarding process is like, if you're not in Illinois or transacting in Illinois, don't complete this onboarding process
Right.
because I
Right.
can't represent you. So like, you're doing IP stuff. So I guess that you could do for
Federal.
anyone,
Yeah.
but how do you handle like a multi-jurisdictional practice for the non-IP stuff?
Yeah. So we tell people up front, so actually there's, we actually have like on our sales process, if somebody indicates that when they're not in California where we're licensed, it'll say, hey, you can still join our program, but just so you know, we can only really advise on copyrights and trademarks. But you can still enjoy the content because that's legal information. But in terms of getting like one-to-one advice, it's only going to be on trademarks and copyrights. So if you're cool with that, come on in. If not, that's okay. And then if somebody comes through and joins, we try to tell them right away, and we'll give refunds. Like if someone's like, crap, I didn't read that, or I didn't know that, or whatever. It's okay. No problem. Here's a refund. Glad you tried it.
Speaking of refunds, one more technology tool. What are you using to process payments?
So we use Recurly, which is great. Like it's like a tank for doing recurring payments. It's pretty robust, pretty technical. It handles a lot of help. It gives you good analysis on things like churn rate and LTV, like the things that anyone who has a subscription should be familiar with. But yeah, we like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm using Stripe right now, which a lot of startups, use. Stripe integrates with my client portal, but you could just, do it right through there. But some of these other apps that have come out, like ChargeBee and Recurly, like they're made from scratch for subscription businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you are the first law firm using the subscription model that I've come across using that. So you've been how long? Like when did you switch over to it, and what is? It sounds like it's been great.
I mean, I think that was from day one.
Wow.
Like I think, when we started, I don't recall if we used anything else. I mean, I think, in the first few months of doing it, I think it was pretty like, done by hand. Kind of, I forget how I was doing it. I think I had people's credit cards on file and I just go through and charge them or something like that. But then, like after a couple of months of doing that, I'm like, okay, what works? And then Recurly was the answer.
Yeah, and so I have to imagine they just take like a percentage, like other payment processors do, like a small percentage, right?
Yeah. And they integrate with Stripe. So it's actually going through Stripe, but they're kind of like a front end for Stripe in that, they'll do things like, recharge the credit card and, or manage the customer information. So like you can tell you who's active, who's not active, send notifications to, Slack or whatever to say someone joined or left or
Right.
what have you.
Right. No, that makes sense. So I use Stripe through my client portal for my law firm, but for my like consulting business, of which this podcast is under, I just used Stripe directly, but it's it doesn't have that kind of information. It's
Right.
very easy to set up one-time payments, subscription
Mhm.
payments, but you can't look at all that data. So it sounds
Right.
like Recurly being built on Stripe is like that additional layer that lets you do all that extra stuff.
Yeah, and stuff like LTV or like, of customers and like to customer cohorts and, like showing like how many people joined in the last month, like what your percentage of revenue changes, all kinds of stuff. It's cool.
Yeah, and in case listeners don't know what LTV is, that's lifetime value. Just in
Yeah, they
case.
have to know. I mean, honestly, I'd say if there's two things you have to know, and this is kind of even with the mindset of subscriptions, it's less about like individual revenue, like on a given transaction, which is kind of the traditional way someone might think of doing business. It's like, okay, this person paid me this much. And it's more about what's the lifetime value of that person. That's the number that matters because you're basically getting paid that over time. And then so lifetime value and then churn rate. Those are the two metrics that I think matter most in a subscription business.
And I'm sure Recurly, like some of these other platforms now, they do like automatic churn reduction management. So like if
Mhm.
someone's credit card is expiring, they'll notify you, they'll
Exactly.
notify the person, right?
Yeah. And they'll try it. And they even have something. I don't know how this is work. It's kind of magic. If someone's credit card updates, they were able to somehow get the number and continue.
This is a relatively new thing.
Yeah.
Even as a consumer, I found that I don't have to put in my new non-expired credit card to app
Yeah.
that I've already been subscribing to. I think there was a recent agreement that was reached between the credit card vendors and those
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah. Like they're like, if you can show that this person authorized you to charge them on a continual basis, then we're cool with that. So go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's that's a relatively recent development. I think that's just
Yeah.
like contracts and agreements and security
Yeah.
features on the back end for all those companies.
Yeah. And I was just like, I don't know how that works, but glad it does. So let's keep doing it.
So now let's get into the minds of your subscribers
Mhm.
or clients as best we can.
Sure.
So for those, I want to know for those who have stayed and been subscribed for a long time, like why do you think that is and what have they told you? And then for those who have unsubscribed, if you've been able to get feedback as to why it wasn't a good
Mhm.
fit or what didn't work for them, why?
Okay. So the people who stay, there's a lot of reasons. I think, if someone has an active business, there, like I said, there's always legal issues. And so one of the things we do is we reach out to people like on an automated basis and be like, hey, we haven't heard from you for a little while. Let's have a conversation. And so a lot of times we'll start those conversations. We're like, yeah, I scheduled the call because you told me to. I don't really know what to talk about. There's always something to talk about. And so that's kind of what keeps people in is because we'll be like, well, tell me about what's going on with your trademark. What do you mean? Okay, cool. Let's talk about that right now.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Or, hey, have you hired anybody or putting out any new products or, has there been any kind of customer disputes recently that have come up? Anything in your business, unless your business is like running perfectly and like you're like just sitting back watching the money flow in, there's always something. So I think, us being proactive about reaching out to people because, I think one thing we realized is people don't always know what legal issues they have. They don't know that they have them. It's kind of like being a doctor. Like, people can have a medical issue that's not apparent on the surface, but it's like, hey, your heart rate or, blood sugar or whatever is out of whack and we need to do something about it. You might not be able to tell or whatever. So anyway, I think, yeah, us checking in with them, that's possible to stay. We have a few people, we have some really interesting subscribers. We have a couple of people who they've told me that they're only subscribing because they like what we're doing and they want to see it continue. And they don't use the service. They're just like, we just like what you're doing. And, we're subscribing for that reason. Love you. And if you need anything, let us know. We're here. We have at least one subscriber. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe one who she likes to discuss articles that she's read about copyright and, IP stuff, just for her own interest, and so I love those calls with her because it's less about like the legal kind of situation and more about like, hey, like, so I've heard about the Supreme Court case that happened with, Andy Warhol. What can you tell me about that? So
I do a surprising amount of that kind of stuff.
yeah.
People like being able to talk to a lawyer and get a legal perspective on
Mhm.
things. It's like having a second brain that's legal, you know?
Yeah. And it's fun for me because, and as you know, that there's a certain level of care and attention and energy you have to put if you're giving someone legal advice. And it's a little bit less if it's just like, hey, like, let's just talk about a case, and me give my kind of perspective on it, but it might not be necessarily something that's applying right to that person. So yeah, I think that's what keeps people on. And I think, our best subscribers are people who have a lot going on. The velocity of their business just demands that they always be in touch with a lawyer. And I think, people who unsubscribe, again, the easiest one are people who their expectations weren't set properly. So, again, someone who's like, okay, like I want to go sue a bunch of people. And yeah, you're going to probably unsubscribe and you should. Let's see. There's people who don't. So, I mean, despite our efforts, people who don't respond to us, like following up, and then they just kind of drift off, and so that's always a challenge. How do you kind of bring people in, and, anyone running a business knows it's difficult to get people to take action, and you have to really, and again, that's on us as business owners to get good and express the value to people and make sure they understand, because everyone has so much coming at them that you really have to make sure you stand out and be valuable. So yeah, I think it's people who, for whatever reason, our message doesn't resonate with them, and then people who go out of business, so I often have people who start out like they're like a freelancer, or, they have one client who, for instance, she went to go work for a big company. She said, well, I don't really necessarily need this, because they have their in-house legal department, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Situational.
yeah, situational. Yeah.
And a lot of times that stuff's just out of our control.
Yeah.
For, you've mentioned it a few times, but like you've touched around it, marketing, getting clients. How do you do it? Like, what's worked for you?
So what's worked really well, and I think lately it's been social, social media. We don't have a gigantic social media platform, but it's moderate, like on Instagram and then Twitter, LinkedIn, I post to pretty frequently. So I get a lot of people just kind of coming to us from that. What I like about that is it almost in a way filters people who are going to, I guess, resonate with us, So like, if you don't like the stuff that we're posting on social, you're not going to like us and we're not going to be a good match for you. Whereas if you do, then, hey, we've already sort of established that, no like and trust factor. So that's good. We've used paid ads a lot, and that can be cool. Like, we've gotten some really good clients that way, but it's also, what do you call it? Like, you have
Diminishing
to keep,
returns.
you have to keep feeding it,
Yeah.
It's like, you don't get it. There's no loyalty there, and there's no evergreenness there. And a lot of SEO. So we actually rank pretty highly for a lot of keywords relevant to our practice. So SEO is a good one too.
That comes back to the brand name too, Counsel for Creators.
Yes, brand name, and then I think just the age of the domain. Mm-hmm. We have content that's been out there for a long time. I think maybe hopefully it's still true. I don't have it checked for a while, but for a while we were like ranking like number 1 or 2 for like small business lawyer Los Angeles.
Yeah, yeah. Which brings me back to multi-jurisdictional practice. So how do you handle referrals? Like, if your client has hired you because you're accessible, you're affordable, your pricing is predictable, but now you can't help them with something, who the heck do you send them to, and how do you manage that expectation?
Well, it depends on the person, and I kind of have that conversation. I say it's like a doctor, and I always use the doctor analogy because I think people have more contact with doctors than the lawyers. So it's like, if you go to your doctor and you're like, it's time for brain surgery, you don't want your general practitioner doing it. So I'm going to refer you, just like that doctor would refer you to someone else. So it sounds like you need a litigator. Sounds like you need someone to talk with about like commercial real estate. So that's not something we do, but here's the person. And so we have a list of referrals. Obviously, we filter them because we don't want to send the lawyers who we're referring to. I forget what you would call that, like referees. We don't want to send them people who are unhinged or don't want to pay money or anything like that. So we do have to do some filtering on the front end. And if we really can't send someone on, then we actually have like a bunch of free resources we send people. We're like, hey, here's like the LA County Bar Association referral service. Check that out. And so that way it's not directly from us, but we're able to be helpful regardless.
Yeah. So getting close to the end here of the interview. So just a few more questions for you. Representing creators like you do, generative AI is all the buzz right now. And I'm having those conversations with guests in that space on this podcast. I'm more interested in your perspective as an attorney representing creatives where generative AI now is coming into those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your experience having to deal with stuff like that?
Oh, you mean like, so as far as my clients' reactions to the whole thing?
And handling it from a legal perspective. Obviously no legal advice given on this podcast, right. But like, how do you, as their counsel, and now they have these, IP related concerns usually, what are you telling them? Like, how are you handling it with them?
Well, I say on a, first of all, I say on a legal level, there's cases that are pending right now. We don't, like, this is so new, we don't know where the line is yet. So as of right now, we're in limbo. And I told them the thing that you can get good at so you can recognize if something does cross an established line is learning about copyright, learning about trademark, right? So that's number 1. So then, kind of be able to discern like, okay, is this actual copying or, is this something that's actionable? be able, as a client, be able to recognize that so you can come to us if you feel like that's happening, right? So understand how copyright works. What I've been telling a lot of people is, so generative AI is here to stay. Like it's not like there's, despite any kind of talk of regulation or this or that, it's not going to be regulated away. So what I tell my clients is really what's going to separate the people who can survive that shift from those who can't are those who can build a brand and build a distinct voice and build a business, right? So that's something AI can't replicate. So you could have two illustrators, one who's like just completely relying on their technical ability, one who might have even less technical ability, but is like, I'm going to build a really good brand. I'm going to have a really good social presence. I'm going to have my company set up the right way and have a good team that can fulfill orders and, create new products. That is the person who's going to succeed. So again, you do have to shift your mindset. So I'd even say like, this is the time to shift from being like, I'm a creative and business doesn't matter to I'm a creative business owner and I'm going to step into that role. So that's what I advise everybody.
Yeah, I'm paying very close attention to all this myself, and I almost wonder if like having, like if you're in the creative space, like having something that says 100% human generated will actually increase the value of that product potentially.
Yeah, it could, or, necessarily what and I've had this conversation with so many of my clients, I should probably just record it or something, but, as we talk about how people want to support other people. Right. So, and I even see this in my firm. I mean, like a lot of our clients are like, yeah, I could go to LegalZoom and give some private equity firm my money, but I'd rather support a local Los Angeles business, so I'm going to do that. I'll pay more for it.
Now pivoting into how are you using generative AI?
So I use generative AI as a research assistant right now. So that's kind of how I do it. I write a lot and I create a lot of content, but I never kind of use the generated product on that. So what it will be is like, here's an article I wrote. Give me 3 books that are relevant to this topic or whatever, give me a quote that maybe I can use in this article. It might be like, take this article and turn it into scripts for TikTok videos or whatever. And I don't, and again, it's really kind of like, I look at it like I've always, employed assistants. So I kind of know how to have that interaction where it's like, if I ask an assistant, hey, can you write like an invite for this event based on, here's the article and we're going to do an event based on what this content is. I kind of know how to tell them that. I told the AI the same thing, at least text-based AI. So yeah, that's kind of how it is. I just kind of look at it as like a really fast research assistant, but one that you have to check. Like actually I got the other day, I had it like, put together something and it gave me a quote from a book that didn't exist. And I was very confident about it. It's like, as so-and-so says in their book, such and such and such and such. And it gave me a whole quote. And I looked at that book on Amazon and looked at for Google. I'm like, that book doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And ChatGPT doesn't do a good job of actually looking up links. It might be doing this now in GPT-4.
Yeah.
Because I gave it a link because I wanted it to summarize a new bill that was being proposed in Congress. And it just straight up made the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Very convincingly. But I think for the most part, the ways you're using it is like just saving time for something an assistant or somebody might do. And if you are employing an assistant, now they could do more value creating work, right? So it's not going to necessarily put anyone out of a job.
No.
Yeah. And something else though, that's super interesting is Bard is much better now than it was even just like a month ago. And if you were to tell ChatGPT, tell me about John Tobin or tell me about Counsel for Creators, it will only have, up to 2021.
Right.
So when I tell it to tell me about Subscription Attorney LLC, it says, I don't know. But when I go into Bard and I say, tell me about Subscription Attorney LLC, and unlike ChatGPT, Bard gives you 3 things. Like, here are the 3 possible answers we could have given you, but they do just show you one first. And it gave me incredible marketing material for me to use just by saying, tell me about me.
Yeah.
And then I took different parts of like each one of those things and I also corrected it when it got something wrong, because this is how I think people will be looking for legal services in the future too. Or instead of Googling Counsel for Creators, they might be in whatever generative AI thing they're using and be like, tell me about Counsel for Creators.
Yeah.
What is it saying about you? Like, I feel like
right? Yeah. Or even like, tell me about trademark registration. And then it might come up with, hey, like John Tobin from Counsel for Creators says you should do it like this,
I mean, how do we get in there like that? How do we slot ourselves in? I think
I don't know. Just keep making good stuff,
I guess so. So last question I want to ask of substance is around let's do two more if we could squeeze it in, because we have
Yeah,
about
sure.
5 more minutes. So
Yeah.
first is you've mentioned accessible pricing a lot. Was access to justice or access to lawyers something that you were thinking about when you initially started your law firm? And what has that been like for you so far?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because, we weren't calling it that, but, essentially I was, like I told you, I was a designer and developer before going to law school. In law school, I realized a lot of this information would have been really helpful to me. And so I was thinking about my friends and people I knew who definitely couldn't pay $500 to hire a lawyer, but would pay something. So I'm like, well, how do we connect? And so I wasn't even thinking about, I didn't even know the term access to justice necessarily, but I was just like, how do you connect? How do you make that connection? So it's interesting. I mean, I feel like we've been able to do a lot for that. I mean, a lot of our clients are first time lawyer users, so that's awesome. Like that's one of my favorite things that we've done is make it so that like, over 1,000 people have hired a lawyer for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then last substantive question is ABA data on the profession has shown that even though more women are going to law school than men now, still leadership at law firms, at the big law firms, only 20% women. There's a huge glut of attorneys of color working at big law firms. And yet the vast majority of attorneys using alternative fee arrangements who are finding success in it are women and attorneys of color. And so why do you think that is? And why should every attorney be trying to do something like this? This is also your chance to pitch the model to lawyers who need convincing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about this topic because I did notice, like, honestly, and this is just anecdotal, maybe the data would say something different, but just in terms of my experience and what I've seen is, yes, I'd probably say in terms of people like law firm owners doing interesting things, it's people of color or women, 80%, like just straight up.
Yeah.
And again, it might be the circles I run in, but it's not like, big law firms, everybody loves them, but they're not really doing anything interesting in terms of this kind of stuff. And I think part of it was necessity. I mean, honestly, for me, it was necessity. I worked at a law firm when I got out of law school for a little bit and I hated it. I did feel like it was the right place for me, and I can imagine a lot of other people feeling that way. In fact, I know that from conversations. It's just like, yeah, I mean, they give me a paycheck, but I don't really feel like this is my place. So I think it's just like, people being innovative. I think some necessity is the mother of invention. So that's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is quite a pivot for this last question I'm going to ask you, which is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
A hot dog is not a sandwich because it does not have two separate pieces of bread.
What if your bun what if your bun is separated? Does that make it a sandwich?
Then it's a hot dog sandwich.
Okay. This is why people come to the Law Subscribed podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned LinkedIn, but is that the best place for people to find you? Where could they connect with you or learn more about Counsel for Creators?
Yeah, counselforcreators.com. We're active on Instagram at Counsel for Creators, on TikTok, Twitter. So if you look for Counsel for Creators on any of the social platforms, you'll find us. Google us, you'll find us.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great time.
Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for sponsoring this show. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with someone you think would find a value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.